So you've got your podcast up and running and it's going well, but my guess is you've clicked on this video because you want to take the next step adding video to your podcast. We're going to be talking gear, settings, and techniques to get you looking like a Hollywood studio in your living room. So let's jump in. First, let's talk about what a video podcast is. It's essentially a podcast with any visual element added to it. So in its most basic terms, a video podcast could technically be the logo of your podcast sitting on top of the audio, just sitting there as a YouTube video. Or it could be a cool audio visualizer graphic that looks like a Windows screensaver. But as we're B&H, we're going to take it to the next step and get some cameras and start filming. If you're a single person podcast, the best looking setup would be something similar to what I've got right now. I'm in the middle of the frame with my eyes crossing the top third and a 3-point lighting setup. I've got my key light here, I've got a fill light over there, and I've got my hair light behind me. Things to look out for here is if you have any lighting in your frame, like a window in the back, for example, you want to be putting your key light on the same side as that, as this will motivate your lighting and it will look a lot more natural. For your podcast mic placement, have it off to the side or below rather than directly in front of you. And this will avoid you making any plosive sounds that pop when you say letters like T or P. It's just not what you want, trust me. And if you can, I would have your microphone directly connected to the camera so you don't have to worry about syncing it in post-production. Now, this isn't a deal breaker, it just will save you a little bit of time in post. Now, audio heads out there might hate me for this, but if you're editing this week by week, you're gonna thank me in the long run. Now we're gonna go through a 2-person podcast setup and break it down into a few sections. We're gonna go camera gear and settings, lighting, and set design. Now, I also appreciate that we have a ton of gear here, which may be a stretch for those just starting out. But even if you add only a couple of things to your setup, it should definitely help improve the look of your video. So for 2 people, the ideal coverage would be a wide shot showing both talkers and then 2 cameras shooting diagonally at each person. This will allow you to make seamless cuts in your edit and really improve the flow and production value of your podcast. You can use any camera for this, whether it's a beginner camera or a pro camera. My advice would just be, if you're looking to invest in a few cameras for your podcast, make sure that you at least get the same brand of camera. This way, the video settings and colors should be similar enough, so it will be a lot easier for you to match them in post-production, because otherwise it could be a huge pain. For your main camera, I would always look for a symmetrical shot. If you have the option to, use something to guide your frame, whether it's a table in the middle, a fireplace in the background, or something that's just dead center in the frame. This will help you create that symmetrical shot a lot easier. Be sure to place your camera on a tripod and make sure you have a completely straight shot. Put your subject's eyes, if possible, or their head at least, across the top intersections on your grid. Go with a wider focal length here so your audience has more context as to where you are, a 24mm or a 35mm. This will help draw your audience in more and make them feel like they're part of the conversation and in the room with you, rather than them observing you from afar. For your B-cam, your diagonal shots, you can go a little bit tighter, something around 50 or even a little bit more, will go a long way to help separate the background from your subject. And this will be perfect for when you want to cut to that person if they're telling an important story or a funny joke or something like that. Framing wise for these, for the person on the left, frame them in the top left third of the camera so their eye line is the same as the wide shot. And the same for the person on the right, but obviously the right side. You have a few options here. You can go for just a clean shot, or you can have an over-the-shoulder shot of the other guest to add some depth into the foreground. The only thing here that you need to worry about is whether the person whose shoulder you're shooting over is going to be moving around a lot. It's really important that they're mindful of how much they're moving. So just before you start filming, make sure to let them know that they have to be pretty still. For your shutter speed, you want to be double your frame rate. So if you're shooting 24 frames per second, 1/48. If you're shooting 30, 1/60. Your main cam, I wouldn't recommend shooting wide open, as you may want slightly more things in focus, so f4, f5.6. This will still give you some background separation, but it'll make sure that everything you need to be in focus is in focus. For your other angles, you can afford to go a bit lower in your aperture to create more separation. Now, all your cameras are set, but I'm guessing it's still looking pretty weird on your set right now, and that's because we've not talked about lighting. This is probably the most important thing that can really boost the production quality of your podcast. So first, we're going to try and tackle the key lighting of our subjects, but in doing so, we're going to be creating a hair light for the person sitting opposite them as well. This is called cross key lighting. Basically, we're going to be putting the key lights diagonally behind them so we can shoot into the shadow side of our subject. This is a little bit more complicated than it sounds though, so spend enough time finding the right spot so both your main subject for that light is lit perfectly, but you're still getting that little kick of a hair light on your other subject. Oh, and by the way, you have to do all of this while keeping the lights out of frame. So it is fairly tricky, but bear with it because with just your key lights, you'll have results like this in camera. I would also set these key lights to a bluer Kelvin if you have the option to. That way, when you introduce some practical lights later, it'll come in handy. Now, the key lights are in place and they do look fantastic, but for my liking, this is a little too contrasty. It may be perfect if you're hosting a true crime podcast, for example. If I'm shooting a podcast, I'm going to be talking about cameras and that makes me happy, so I need a little bit more of a cheerful setup. This brings me on to a fill light. Now, I'd recommend just one fill light, which I would set up right behind the main tripod in the middle of the shot. Now, I'd put a lantern modifier or a large softbox so you get a nice wide spread fill across the scene. Not only adding less shadows onto your subject, but adding a touch of light onto your background as well. Now, a niche pro tip here, but one that is very important for my fellow spectacle wearers. We know we get weird reflections when filming. It always happens if you've got glasses on. That's why, for the majority of the films of the Harry Potter series, Daniel Radcliffe's not wearing any lenses. Seriously, go watch it, you'll never be able to unsee it. So if you're wearing glasses, sit in your seat and have someone adjust the height of the light until it looks the best for you. And once you've done that, your scene will look like this. So we've actually managed to get a 3-point lighting system for 2 people with just 3 lights here. But now let's get onto the fun stuff, a little bit of set design. So if you want a splash of color in the background that matches the branding of your podcast, you can't go wrong with a tube light. You can put this on the back of the wall shooting from the floor up or the ceiling down. Either way, whichever way works for you, it looks fantastic. It's also a great idea to maybe throw a practical lamp in there. And as we've got our video lights set to a more bluish Kelvin, they will look really warm in the background and create a nice, relaxing environment. If you want to throw a plant, a bookshelf, or a topic-related prop in there, that's also a fun idea and it just adds a little more to the set. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention, if you're using any filters like an ND filter or a CPL on your cameras, make sure that you're using the same brand throughout your camera setup. This way you can avoid having any different hue shifts that some filters will do, because that's really annoying to fix in post. The last thing for set design is if you're using podcast mics, it always helps to have a nice podcast arm like this, or a desk stand if you're around a table. If you're using XLR cords or USB-C cables, then they're just out of frame as no one wants to see cables all over the place. And once you've got that sorted, you're ready to start filming and get your episode in the books. And once the dust has settled and you've come down from that high of recording the best podcast to ever have podcasted, you're going to want to edit the podcast. Now, while we're not going to go into a big deep dive here on editing, because I've got a whole separate video of that coming, we're going to consider a few things here. First of all, let it breathe. Podcasts are conversations between people. So if you're a one-person podcast, it's a conversation between you and your audience. So if people stumble a little bit, or they say, or they pause for half a second, don't rush to cut that out in the edit. Now, if someone completely stumbles or goes off in a completely unrelated tangent that offers nothing to the episode, then obviously you can cut that out as you want it to flow naturally. If you have multiple cameras, don't be cutting every 5 seconds. Make sure that the cuts you make are intentional, as you don't want to be flip-flopping around each camera. And finally, make sure that you dial in the audio. Even if you're recording on a really nice podcast mic like this, into an interface with presets, there's always room for improvement. So be sure to give it a little bit more warmth and make it as full as it possibly can be. Now, your video looks great, it's edited fantastically, but how are we going to make sure that everyone gets to see it? This is where you need to do a little bit extra to be planning your video podcast strategy. Now, if you've watched my previous video here on everything you need to know about audio podcasts, you should be all set with a very solid audio podcasting plan. But now you should be doing these little few extra things to do for your video podcast to make sure that everyone sees that. First things first, you want to be creating social media accounts with the name of your podcast, providing it already hasn't been taken. But you should be pretty safe with that, as I imagine you researched this before you started the podcast. And this should also be the same for a YouTube channel. You want to make sure you lock that down as well. Now, don't just upload a video and done. You need to go into YouTube Studio, and then on the top right, it will say click create. So if you click down on this, you'll have a new menu where you'll see new podcast. Click this and then obviously create new podcast. Add the title of your podcast, the description, and in there you should also include your social media handles and links to find them. Another really important part of creating video podcasts is creating a thumbnail. Now, if you're not a graphic designer, do not worry. Just taking a designated picture of all of your hosts on set will be a lot better than just grabbing a frame from the video. And as well, if you add simple text on the bottom or on the top, just saying episode 1, episode 2, whichever episode it is, this will go a long way and look a lot more professional, and it'll give you a lot more consistency if you keep this trend up. Now, you may be wondering why I've said to create social media accounts. Well, to promote your podcast, you can make short vertical videos of each episode to get a more consistent presence out there online. You're basically rehashing your content into bite-sized pieces while promoting your episodes at the same time. 2 birds and 1 stone and all that. It's a win-win situation. You really can't go wrong. And when you're posting new episodes, make sure to create links to your audio streaming platforms into your bio of your social media channels as well as your YouTube channel. And when those episodes come out, add them to your story, creating links for your audience to directly click onto the podcast. The fewer links they have to click, the more likely they are to watch it. And get your friends, your family, your colleagues, even your pets, everyone you know, share the first couple of episodes of your podcast to their audience to cast a net as wide as possible. And hopefully you'll be pretty impressed with the amount of listeners you get. So that's everything I have for you on how to make your video podcast look better and the best ways to make sure that everyone can see it. I hope this has given you a little bit of inspiration. If you have more comments, questions, or concerns, please do drop them down below. But in the meantime, I've been Matt, and thanks for watching.